Good afternoon. Today we're going to start our meeting without all of our members. They are on the way, so without objection, we're going to move forward on that. Today, the Rules Committee will consider H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act. H.R. 2017 revises the Food and Drug Administration's menu labeling regulations to account for unique requirements of certain food businesses. The current rules are far too burdensome and expensive, and I believe harsh for establishments like convenience stores, supermarkets, grocery stores, and pizza shops to adhere to without undue penalties. This bill improves customer access to nutrition information, the needs that a customer needs to understand not only for themselves but for their children, and it takes into account unique challenges posed to certain establishments so that neither the customer nor the producer is threatened, and certainly not at an onerous price with overzealous regulations. With us today on H.R. 2017 is the chairman of the Republican Conference, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who is from the state of Washington, who's also the author of the bill. We also have the ranking member from Energy and Commerce, the gentleman from New Jersey, our dear friend Frank Pallone, and evidently Rosa DeLauro, who is listed, but I don't see as DeLauro. Do we have any other members? Do we have, and so she's at a hearing, that's okay. I didn't mean to preempt anything here. If we have any other member, we would like to put them on this panel. Seeing none, we will move forward. We're delighted that both of you are here. I call Congresswoman McRogers. Sorry about that. I've done that for 10 years now. It is almost sounds like an item that is on the menu, but we are delighted. We are delighted that you are both here. I don't know how many times you've been up here, Kathy. We have fun up at the Rules Committee, despite what you've heard. But without objection, anything you have in writing, I would appreciate you leaving for our awesome stenographer. And before we acknowledge both of you and ask you to give testimony, I'd like to defer to the gentleman from Massachusetts for any comment that he'd make. The ranking members recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome both of our witnesses. I'm somebody who believes that consumers deserve as much nutritional information as they can possibly get, because I think that's important in making good decisions. I'm sensitive to issues of compliance, and some businesses are more easily able to comply than others. But I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony. I do want to just say our friend Frank Pallone is with us, and you may not know, Mr. Chairman, but his dad passed away just a couple of days ago, and we want him to know that he and his family are in our prayers, and we appreciate him being here today. So I'll yield back my time.
Thank you very much. In fact, I did not know that. I thank the gentleman for that. This is a very, very small committee, and Mr. Pallone, you know that we work well with each other and together. And sometimes we get a chance to share your sorrows too, and so I'm very sorry to hear about your dad. A number of members bring their parents up here. My dad, former director of the FBI, comes up here occasionally. Everybody ends up saying that that's their favorite sessions. I'm no longer in the hunt anymore. But we really know each other and care about each other a lot, and our dads and moms are important. So the expression of sorrow goes with you, and thank you for taking time to be with us today.
You should be glad that I don't bring my mother up here, because she'd be yelling at you for not voting with me enough.
Let me tell you what. If Louise Slaughter was here, she could tell the story about one day, my mother, a couple times they've talked, but my mother is, her favorite congressman is Chris Van Hollen. And I am nowhere on the list, but Chris is, and my mom is really proud of that. She doesn't know what she did wrong here, but we'll just have to put up with some of those things. So my mom suffers every day. Ms. Chairwoman McRogers, we're delighted that you're here, and the gentlewoman is now welcome for a testimony.
I probably shouldn't say this, but my mom's favorite congressman is Louis Gohmert from Texas, so I don't know what that means about. Anyway, and I too, let me convey my sympathies to the ranking member. We've had some good discussions on this bill too, and I'm sorry to hear about your father's passing. Thank you, Chairman Sessions, and all members of this committee for the opportunity to testify on this bipartisan legislation, H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act of 2015. And I want to thank Representative Loretta Sanchez for co-leading this legislation. Our joint bipartisan efforts to clarify these regulations and represent the needs of America's small businesses are vital. When the FDA announced its final rule implementing the National Menu Labeling Standard in 2014, the intent was twofold. First, to deliver customers increased access to nutrition information. Second, to establish a single uniform national standard. Having reliable nutritional information available to consumers is important, which is why this discussion today is not about the merits of calorie counts in restaurants or whether or not restaurants should display calorie information. Today's discussion is on the practicality of existing regulations and how we can improve them to benefit the lives of the American people. While the rule's intent to increase access to nutrition information is admirable, good intentions don't always add up to practical policy. In trying to create a uniform standard, the FDA's 400-page rule attempts a one-size-fits-all approach to an industry as diverse as its ingredients. The result is one of the most expensive and onerous regulations of the entire Obama administration, requiring over 15 or almost 15 million hours of additional paperwork for our small business owners. Every deli and salad bar offering, every possible pizza topping combination will soon have to be calculated and their calorie count displayed on physical menus. In many cases, digital and online ordering has become a consumer's preferred method of ordering. Yet the FDA insists that in-store menu boards be labeled regardless of their utility. Requiring pizza franchises to post in their stores every potential topping combination. More than 34 million possible outcomes. When more than 90% of their orders take place online over the phone, it just doesn't make sense. Applying the same standard to salad bars and pizzerias as restaurants with a fixed menu is unrealistic, and it forces business owners to spend valuable time, energy, and financial resources on compliance rather than on business growth, job creation. I've met with many stakeholders and other member offices on all sides of this issue many times, and each time we've asked how we could improve on these regulations. And this legislation, 2017, is the result of those efforts. This common sense legislation clarifies the intent of the FDA's rule and uses technological innovations to improve needed flexibility to America's business owners. It would permit restaurants, grocers, convenience stores to provide nutrition information in a way that's consistent with how they operate and how consumers actually place orders, including by phone, online, and through mobile apps. I'd like to think that this legislation is bringing the rule into the 21st century. Consumers can trust they're getting more reliable information and they can get it in an easier way. It also makes certain that small business owners and their employees are protected from frivolous lawsuits and criminal actions that could arise from an honest, inadvertent human error. An employee that puts too many pickles on a sandwich, thereby increasing the calorie count, as stated on the menu, should not face criminal charges or a class action lawsuit. If something isn't done, the FDA's final rule threatens to irreversibly damage many of our nation's greatest job creators, unnecessarily placing thousands of Americans in jobs on the chopping block. Again, this is bipartisan legislation, it's common sense, it provides access to calorie information in a practical, flexible, and simpler manner by clarifying, not significantly altering complicated regulations. And I thank the chairman and yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pallone, we're delighted that you're with us today. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to include my entire statement in the record.
Without objection,
and
we'll do that.
Thank you, and just summarize.
Thank you.
Particularly in light of what you and Ms. McMorris-Rogers said. First of all, let me say that I do appreciate that in both the chairman's case and Ms. McMorris-Rogers' case that, you indicated very strongly that you're not opposed in any way to menu labeling, but rather, and so therefore the issue really here is implementing this policy practically, and I think that's what you were certainly referring to. And I guess that's where there's a big difference in terms of why I'm opposed to this bill, even though I know there's no disagreement that we should try to achieve the same goal. But I do want to point out that, the bill is designed because, we do have a major problem with obesity in the country. We have some statistics that show that 2/3 of adults and 1/3 of children are considered to be overweight or obese. And so by indicating caloric content, we're trying to make people understand what they can do in a sort of responsible way to reduce the number of calories that they take in. And I really see the law or the statute the way it is now, and the purpose here is really what I call right to know. In other words, if you tell people what's going on around them, then they can make their own responsible decisions to make good health decisions and to prevent themselves from getting sick. And so this is, as you know, was part of the Affordable Care Act, as part of the whole prevention aspect of the Affordable Care Act, which was designed to try to achieve certain prevention goals, and this is in line with that. The problem that I see is that, unlike what I'm hearing from my Republican colleagues so far, I think that the FDA, in promulgating draft rules and guidance, has really gone out of its way to try to accommodate and provide significant amount of flexibility dealing with the various industries involved. First of all, I should mention that we're really not talking about mom and pop establishments here because the law does not apply to small businesses as retail establishments with 20 or fewer locations. Those are completely exempt. In addition to that, there are a lot of exemptions. I mean, there are, in terms of food items that are exempted from menu labeling, I'm only giving you a partial list: daily specials, temporary, occasional menu items, custom orders, condiments for general use. I mean, there are many, many items that are exempt. But the main thing that I wanted to stress, and I'm saying this from a practical point of view because I've actually gone to supermarkets, I've gone out with some of the people that were working with the FDA to try to implement this in a fair and practical way, is that the FDA has really tried, in my opinion, to work with retail establishments to see what works practically, and they actually have delayed their final rules for 2 years. So this isn't something that's happening today or has even happened already. They're still working with the retail establishments to try to come up with the best means of implementing this legislation. And so I think that not only is this legislation the wrong way to go, it's also premature because the EPA hasn't actually finalized this and put it into effect. So let me just mention a few things. First of all, in order for this right to know to work, in other words, in order for people to really know what they're getting and for the menu labeling to work, you have to have clear, consistent calorie information to consumers at the point of purchase. So one of the problems that I have with the bill is that I think that it makes it more difficult to do that at the point of purchase because it allows restaurants and retail food establishments to limit calorie count disclosure to a single menu. In some instances where an establishment receives the majority of their orders to only provide such information remotely through a website. If the person can't actually see this calorie content at the point of purchase, if you will, then I think that the rule becomes ineffective. The other thing, too, is that I know that Ms. McMorris-Rogers mentioned enforcement. What her bill does is to prohibit the FDA from requiring that covered establishments certify that the nutrition information that is disclosed is truthful and not misleading. And it also shields covered establishments from any civil lawsuits for not complying with the menu labeling requirements. I would say that by doing that, you basically take any real enforcement or teeth out of the bill. If you can't enforce the bill, then why in the world are any of these retail establishments actually going to go along with the law and do the right thing? So those are two of the concerns that I have, is that By implementing this bill, you basically play with the serving size for a standard menu. You make it more difficult for people to really know what they're actually getting at the point of purchase by playing with the serving size or by saying that, you can do this at a single menu and not actually at the point of purchase. So again, I don't think the issue here really is whether we're going to do this, but how we're going to do this. I think the FDA is moving in the right direction. They've worked with the retail establishments. They've made certain exemptions. They made it possible, I think, to have this clear and concise information for people to know what they're getting into and be able to act on the information presented. If you put this bill in place, I think all that goes out the window. People will not know exactly what the caloric content is at the point of purchase. They won't be able to really figure out what it's all about. There won't be any penalties if someone does the wrong thing. And so the bill, which right now I think has a lot of flexibility and has a lot of effort on the FDA to actually do the right thing, just essentially falls apart and is no longer effective. I'll yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pallone, I heard you say that fast food restaurants, pizzerias, literally are the marketplace.
Well, pizzas, I don't know if this is what you wanted. I don't even know if you're asking me a question, but.
I think that was a question.
All right.
Well,
let me give you an
implying that
example.
That's the whole waterfront.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the mom, first of all, you have to have, like, a supermarket has to have 20 stores. Any kind of, it has to be a chain restaurant. Like where I am, if you have 20 retail outlets, that's a pretty big establishment. It's not your typical mom and pop store that we're talking about here, Mr. Chairman. Is that what you're referencing?
It's fast food. There are multiple opportunities for you to mix and match and order this and order that, as opposed to going to a restaurant, sitting down and ordering off a menu that's able to have been looked at, and they know what the value might be. That's all I'm suggesting. This is what her legislation's all about.
Well, I don't know if I want to disagree with you, but
I think you can. That's not.
Well, no, in other words, like in New Jersey, for example, you have places that have more than 20 establishments that are not fast food. What do you mean exactly?
I think what she tried to say is that this applies and does not apply to certain people. You're not trying to do away with every bit of this regulation.
This legislation, if I may, is really about improving menu labeling and giving consumers what I would suggest is even more accurate, consumer-friendly information. And franchisees are small businesses, and the cost on an individual franchisee, I would use the example of a pizzeria, and we talked about this in committee quite a bit. But the idea that somehow a pizzeria can put on the menu board the 34 million different combinations of pizza between the toppings and the crust and everything else, and what FDA will say, well, then just do ranges. And I think we've all seen, because of the restaurants and their menu labeling, we've seen those ranges. Now, how much does that really add to your, give you the most accurate information? Pizzerias, 90% of the ordering of pizza now is done either on the telephone or online. And this legislation would allow for more flexibility, a 21st century solution where you can go to your app and as you put the pizza together, know exactly, either buy the pizza or buy the pizza slice, how many calories you're looking at. And right now, FDA refuses to consider that kind of a solution. And there has been a lot of conversations with the FDA. Unfortunately, the FDA continues to promote a rule that is unworkable for many individual franchisees and other delis and convenience stores around this country.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that her example is a good one, but I think it proves my point instead. In other words, again, this is not in effect right now. FDA is still working on this, but so far, with regard to pizza restaurants, for example, the FDA, I think, provided significant flexibility. They say in their draft rule and their draft guidance that for menu items with multi-servings, such as pizza, establishments have the option of declaring calories for the whole menu item as listed on the menu, such as pizza pie, 1,600 calories, or per serving unit, for like example, a pizza slice, as long as the total number of serving units are declared on the menu, such as pizza pie, 200 calories per slice, 8 slices, okay? So for items with multiple toppings like pizza, they have to declare the calories for the basic preparation of the standard menued items, such as a cheese pizza, and then list the calories for each topping separately, indicating that these are added calories to the standard menu item. I mean, you go into a pizza pie, you order a plain, or you add sausage or peppers. This is what they're talking about. And if the toppings have the same calorie amount, such as green peppers and onions, they can be grouped. So again, I think you have to understand that, I don't know, this isn't like our traditional ideological battle here, guys.
No.
This is basically what I'm saying is that I think the FDA has been tremendously flexible, and that if you implement what my colleague wants, that the basic purpose of the bill, which is to be able to know at point of purchase what your calorie count is, disappears. And that's really what we're arguing here, plus the lack of enforcement, which, I mean, obviously she thinks that's okay, but I think that establishments, if there's no enforcement, because it's, they're not going to do it. So I just think that the bill just obliterates, practically speaking, the purpose of what the original statute was trying to do.
Well, I voted against it when I voted against the Affordable Care Act. I'm not for any of it. I like to go to restaurants where they put a little heart on there, or they put something about less calories, or when I go up, they remind me, I'm going to tell Karen that you ordered something that's fattening or something. And so I think that's freedom. So that's just the way of Texan things. So I guess I'm closer to your perspective, Ms. McRogers, and I appreciate y'all being here. Chairman Cole?
Thank you very much. I won't take a lot of time, but I just want to associate myself with your remarks quickly. I'm sorry I missed the chairman's testimony and got here a little bit late, but I have had a chance to look at the bill. I'm very much in agreement with what you're trying to do, and I actually think you should be welcoming this on the Democratic side. Here we are working with you to try to make Obamacare better, something that you've been pleading with us to do for many months. The chairman, in good faith effort, has reached across the aisle to do it, and gosh, our hand is slapped back. But bottom line is, I really think this is a case where we have gone too far. We've gotten an awful lot of industry complaints and concerns about this, and gosh, at some level, I just trust the good sense of the American people to make really good decisions for themselves. Obviously, there's a role for us to play, but I think we're going a little bit too far. So I want to applaud Chairman McMorris-Rodgers for I think, trying to actually correct something and give us something positive that we can both agree on. So no particular questions. I'd certainly give either of you a chance to comment if you care to.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say is, I'm not trying to be cute about this, but I really think, a lot of times when I hear from the Republican side of the aisle, it's the idea of people taking personal responsibility. In many ways, I think that that's what this is all about. In other words, you give people information, but it has to be information that's useful, and that's, I think, where we disagree as to, how useful this is if it gets changed by this bill. You give people information, and then they take the personal responsibility to decide, I'm going to eat this or not. I don't care. I don't care if I have 2,000 calories today, but maybe tomorrow I decide I want to go on a diet. So, I think that the idea of giving people good information to take responsibility is something that we all share. Again, the difference is that I honestly believe that with her legislation, you're basically gutting the bill so that it's not going to be effective anymore.
Well, I am committed. This legislation from the very beginning has been about making sure that the consumer does have the information to make smart decisions, take that responsibility. The legislation gives flexibility to the individual, whether they're grocery stores, delis, restaurants, gives them flexibility to decide maybe how that information can be displayed in a way that I believe is going to provide even better consumer information in the end. Take the salad bar, for example. If right now is going to be those ranges that are available within the salad bar. why not allow the owner of the salad bar to be able to go in there and do individual serving size or by ingredient, and the individual can figure out then what they're adding on their salad and what the total's going to be. And I believe that's going to result in smarter decisions by all. Unfortunately, the FDA rules do not provide that flexibility. And in the 21st century, we can provide that kind of individualized information to the individual. I just want to say there are penalties in this bill. What we do is, I mentioned the example of the employee that adds an extra pickle to the hamburger, right? And so that the calorie count listed as on the hamburger, because it was unintentional, but they added an extra pickle, that they aren't held liable for human error in all of this. And so there is a protection for inadvertent human error, but it gives an opportunity for the restaurant or the business to take action, and they are held accountable by the FDA or by the state regulator.
But it doesn't allow for civil suits brought by the individuals against the establishment.
That is true.
Well, Madam Chairman, if you can tell me where that restaurant is that adds the extra pickle, that's where I will go. So I'm persuaded, so yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Cole, thank you very much. Mrs. Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you. And if I could be personal for a moment, Frank, I've looked for you all day to express my condolences on the loss of your father. And I just ask unanimous consent to put into the record, really, 111 signers of the joint statement in opposition that basically is made
Without
up of
objection.
people from medical schools, bariatric associations, endocrinologists, nursing, and a lot of food people. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
No
Thank you
further
very much.
questions.
Gentleman
Thank you.
yields back time. Gentleman from Louisville, Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think I'll get a lot of opportunity to talk about this on the floor tomorrow, but, so I wasn't really going to say much, but it just begs the question, if we're sitting up here in the Rules Committee talking about the caloric similarity of onions and peppers, I mean, is there not something better we should be doing with our time? But it all comes back to the darn Affordable Care Act and the difficulty that legislation has imposed upon the country. Look, if it was the business of the federal government to be concerned about people's caloric intake, and that was the number one driver of what caused us to be the federal government, it seems like we would prohibit the inclusion of high fructose corn syrup in those foods that are available for purchase with food stamps that we subsidize. I would get that as an exercise in prohibiting obesity or trying to modify obesity, but this, preventing the free exercise of one's decision-making, I'll just share with you, I do a lot of field work, a lot of it undercover, on Friday evenings at my local pizza place. And it is generally ordered for me by my wife on her iPad, so I haven't seen the menu quantities. I trust her that she's not trying to overdose me on peppers and onions. But, you know, it just begs the silliness of the underlying premise in the Affordable Care Act that we're going to be able to regulate human behavior on a scale writ large at a pizza place on a Friday night, and yet we subsidize a lot of activity with our food stamp activities that, quite frankly, I just simply do not understand. I don't understand why corn chips and soda water is available with food stamps. It seems like it should only be peppers and onions, but we don't do that. We're going to hit the poor working stiff who's stopping on the way home to pick up a pizza on a Friday night and make their life more miserable. And I guess really the galling part about this, and I was just rereading the statute, 4205 in Obamacare. Where did we come up with a criminal punishment for not complying with this? Did this actually come through the rulemaking in the FDA, or did we actually write that down in legislation? Where did that come from?
But you know,
No, answer my question. Who made this a criminal exercise to not label your food properly?
I can't answer.
Was that the FDA, or did you do that when you wrote Obamacare behind closed doors in the middle of the night?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the underlying FDA law, but the thing that I don't understand, and I appreciate what you're saying, but to me, this is just a right to know provision. In other words, we're not mandating that anybody not eat anything or not be allowed to eat anything. You can eat all you want, and no matter how
Someone's
bad it
going
is.
to jail if the label's wrong, and that's what really.
Well, that's correct,
what
but
sticks
that's
in your
it.
craw,
But that's
right?
not saying what you can eat or not eat, Dr. Burgess. It's just basically giving people information so they can make their own decisions. That's kind of a Republican philosophy, isn't it? And I mean, well, I would like to say it's democratic too, but I mean, we're not mandating anything.
No,
We're just
you're sending
basically,
people to jail for not
but
labeling
not the
their pizza
person who's
properly.
eating, not the customer, the company that doesn't provide the information so that you can make a decision.
The poor bloke that I buy the pizza from on Friday night now is engaging in a criminal
Well,
exercise.
not the individual, the establishment,
Under the rules, it is the individual.
not the individual.
Well, aren't these franchises owned by individuals?
Well, my understanding is, look, if you've got 20 or more, establishments, then you come under it, yes.
But look, obviously, we disagree about this. Again, I get a lot of chance to talk about this on the floor tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it. But I appreciate the conference chair bringing the information to us here in the Rules Committee, and look forward to seeing you on the floor
Well,
tomorrow.
and if I might, this is a huge mandate on individual businesses all across this country, very costly. It's going to take a lot of time, and at the end of the day, it could be done in a more effective and more flexible way to still accomplish the goal.
But again, she's not, I mean, in many ways, my colleague here is more in agreement with me than you are, because you don't think we should be doing it all.
Well-
She's saying we should do it. It's a question of how. You're saying you wouldn't have it done at all.
No, I would not have gone in this
All right,
direction.
well,
The
so
Affordable
that's
Care
like-
Act.
we
And
can't argue with
further,
you.
I would prefer that we free up the FDA to find the cure for cancer and approve that, and not be dabbling in our menus. Mr. Chairman, with no thought for my personal safety, I will continue to do the undercover work on Friday evenings at the pizza plates of my choice, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mike, you need to be careful. Laura can get even also. So, good for you. I appreciate everybody's comments. Louise, thank you for yours. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
I strongly disagree with the gentleman from Texas that somehow this is.
Both of them.
Well, I guess both, yeah, everybody from Texas, I guess I disagree with these days.
Now, are you Mr. Hastings?
No, I have to be careful. I love the state of Texas. I want to go visit there. But this is not frivolous stuff. The gentleman talked about he wants the FDA to be more committed to finding a cure to cancer. Let me tell the gentleman that there is a correlation between what we eat and a lot of the physical ailments we get. There is a relationship between what we eat and diabetes, what we eat and high blood pressure, what we eat and heart disease, what we eat and cancer. And nobody's saying you can't eat all the junk food in the world that you want. But quite frankly, I don't see what the big to-do is as to whether or not people have the right to know what they're eating. And they could decide that I don't want to eat all those calories, or they could decide that they do. It's purely up to them. But let's not trivialize the link between diet and disease and the cost of bad diets, especially early on, and a lifetime of disease. So if you want to talk about controlling healthcare costs, you got to get this right. And I would tell the gentleman, it's just not poor people that buy junk food. People of every economic income buy junk food. And I'll just say one other thing. One of the reasons why people who are on food stamps end up having to buy food with a lot of empty calories, and quite frankly, what some of us would consider, junkier food, if you will, is because it's cheaper. And the benefit that we provide people, an average of $1.40 per meal per person, it doesn't afford you the ability to go out and buy a lot of fresh vegetables and a lot of salads and a lot of fresh meats and a lot of things. When you're trying to support a family on a food stamp budget, believe me, it is hard, and you make choices that will last you for the month. So you go and you buy the ramen noodles, and because you can't afford to do this on a regular basis. So I just will caution the gentleman that it's not that it's people who are on a SNAP diet somehow prefer to buy less healthy food, oftentimes.
Will the gentleman yield?
Happy to yield.
Well, first off, ramen noodles actually comprise a big part of my diet when I'm in Washington DC, so no disparagement.
And that's your choice.
No disparagement of ramen noodles.
You
But
can afford,
Mr.
you can afford something else if you want. But
Mr. McGovern, the point was, we subsidize the purchase of foods with high fructose corn syrup with our food stamp dollars. We could stretch those food stamp dollars a lot farther if we would not engage in that sort of behavior. That was the only point I was trying to make.
I say to the gentleman, too, one of the things, again, rather than cutting food stamps, which this Congress has done on multiple occasions, some of the things that are actually going on are trying to, make the SNAP dollar actually go further at farmers markets, trying to match the SNAP dollar when there are healthier purchases. SNAP education programs to help make people make healthier choices. So there are those efforts. But let's understand one thing. When you are getting on average $1.40 per meal per person, there ain't a hell of a lot you can do to make your diet more healthy. And I just point that out because the gentleman raised that issue. I would if we could find a way to make it easier for people to afford more healthier foods who are in low income, I'd be happy to. The other problem, too, is depending on where you live, you may not have access to a supermarket. And there are a lot of places, even in Massachusetts, a lot of cities where people live without transportation, who live not anywhere near a place where you could buy anything remotely fresh. So there are a lot of ways to deal with this. But at a minimum, I think, allowing people to know what they're eating is not a big deal. And in fact, if it can encourage some people to make healthier choices and prevent them from getting diseases that will make their life more miserable, and by the way, cost them and the system a lot more in healthcare costs, why not do it? So I appreciate the testimony here today, but I'm on the side of people's ability to know. And I think the gentleman inserted into the record, I think it was the letter from the Center on Science and Public Interest. But some of the people that are opposed to this bill, by the way, include the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, the American Academy of Sports Dietitians and Nutritionists, American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, American Diabetes Society, American Heart Association, American Institute for Cancer Research, American Public Health. I go on and on and on and on. I think these organizations see the link between diet and health, and if this has already been put in the record, I hope it will be. And I'm asked to put, what is this? I'm putting in the record. Oh, and I'm putting in the Congressional Budget Office cost estimate of the implementation of this bill, which says that H.R. 2017 would cost us $9 million over the 2016-2021 period, and assuming appropriations of the necessary amounts. So anyway, I ask unanimous consent.
The objection. Gentleman, yield back his time.
I do.
I would assume all 9 million was for fines that they would have expected to have received.
Boy, this bill is estimated to be nearly $1 billion impact as far as implementation. It's the third most costly regulation to date out of this administration, and it's largely going to be imposed upon a lot of small business owners around this country. Your delis, your pizzerias, your convenience stores, all are going to feel the burden of this regulation on them.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Plone, do you want to add to that?
Well, I'm just repeating myself when I say that there are a lot of exemptions, and you'd have to have at least 20 outlets to even come under the legislation.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Look, I applaud Representative Morris Rogers for bringing it. I think it's look, I'm sort of in agreement with the good doctor from Texas on this. Ms. Plone, you're closer to Ms. Morris Rogers on this issue because, frankly, and I'm not going to get into a large debate here. This is just not one that I will. But the ability to know, there's plenty of out there, and we do have companies are putting that out there. It's a marketing that's great. I'm glad. But anybody that says that they didn't know that a double cheeseburger has calories in it, I'm sorry. I mean, if they didn't know that adding cheese or adding, look, my wife teaches elementary school. We teach from health. I mean, it's taught all along. Make good choices. Get more exercise. Those are the kind of just, personal choices. If this actually was one that to some people will it matter? Yes. But also, I'm gonna say this, that to anyone that going into a restaurant and seeing an individual, if I put this piece or this piece on there, and it made me change a different choice, I'd probably guess that they were probably a lot more conscious of their own diet before they ever walked into the place. I do not see someone who never has looked at the caloric intake saying, wow, I didn't really realize that, and making some of those choices. It's a bill, I look forward to voting for the bill. I think it goes more of a base understanding of government and government's role. But I mean, look, both sides, right to know, there's plenty of right to know, and I'm not gonna argue with my friends across the aisle on this. It's just a basic difference of opinion here. And if we're taking away the ability of jobs and other things that they're having to put into menu counts, let me ask, are we increasing the issue of the problems of jobless and employment, which lead to issues of food needs in homes and also in schools and these kids? There's a lot of different things out there that we can work on. This is one that has been put forward. I look forward to voting for it. It is just, again, focusing on what the good doctor from Texas said. There's just a lot of other things out there that can be helpful in preventive medicine and preventive ideas that keep these costs down instead of focusing what looks like window dressing, and especially from a bill that has a $1 billion cost estimate. This is just, something that's just amazing to me. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McGovern asked that I yield some time to him, so
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
at this time, I'd like to yield to
Yes,
him
sir.
and reserve the
Yes, sir.
rest of my time.
No, I would just simply say that, it isn't as cut and dry of an issue as the gentleman just noted. The fact of the matter is that a lot of what's is advertised is misleading. There's lots of people go and buy a salad and think that it's healthy, thinking that the calories are reasonable, and all of a sudden they find out that there's because of all the added things that are put into it, it's not particularly healthy at all. It's like when you go to a supermarket and you buy something that says 20% less sodium. Then what? The Dead Sea? I mean, it could be terribly unhealthy for you. Things that are labeled natural are anything but natural. There's lots of misleading stuff out there. So sometimes when people even make the attempt to try to make healthy choices, there's a lot of misinformation out there. The one thing that is easy to understand is calories, and I do think that sometimes you ought to know a cheeseburger probably has more calories than a carrot. I get that. But sometimes you don't realize how many calories are in that particular cheeseburger based on all this other stuff that's added to it. So calorie labels are important. Again, I look at this as a public health issue. People can ignore it. Some people on this committee don't care how many calories are in something they eat. That's fine. But I do think that for a lot of people, when they realize how many calories are in something, they don't buy it. I'll give you an example. There's a restaurant that's on the hill here that sells a lot of pastries, and they went through this whole thing where they actually listed the calories in some of the pastries. These little tiny cookies, which were like, the calorie intake was astronomical. They took it all down because people weren't buying the cookies because they didn't realize how many calories were in them. People make choices based on those things, so I wouldn't diminish the importance of labeling. People have a right to know, and if you don't care, you don't have to pay attention to them. But I think a lot more people care than we give them credit for. I yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This discussion is making me hungry.
Want to go get a cheeseburger?
I was here as you were, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Slaughter and Mr. McGovern, when we had lots of discussion about labeling in a rather general way. And I don't know about most of you, but I find it comforting to go into the grocery store, and on occasion I do find myself, and this is beyond the retailing and the pizza talk and the deli establishments, but in a grocery store, years ago there were no labels with reference to caloric content and nutritional content. And now there is. And I make decisions sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of people do, based on that labeling that was fought so hard against it being done. But Ms. McMorris Rogers, I wanted to ask you, in the legislation, if a restaurant gets most of its orders online, am I correct, it's not required to post calorie information in its brick and mortar establishment?
It would allow them the flexibility to meet those requirements, but it would provide for there being options to get that information online or on an app or some other way of getting that information.
So then what are customers who place their orders in the stores supposed to do?
Well, they would have that calorie information available, but it clarifies what a menu is. For example, right now FDA is saying if you put a flyer out on the pizza box, for example, that is considered a menu. And then you have to put all of that somehow on that flyer. And it's just really impossible to put all that on a little flyer.
I understand. And I would think it would be equally impossible with an app to get the information that you're talking about. And I'm just concerned.
They can do it with an app.
They can?
You can watch as you put the ingredients on the pizza, and
Okay.
and the calories go up as you put the ingredients on that, and then it calculates it
Okay,
either
so
by
then-
whole pizza or pizza slice.
Then my question, and I have to remind the young people that work with me all the time, that a lot of people don't have computers.
Right.
So what happens with reference to those people when it comes to getting their caloric information?
Well, they would probably receive ranges. But what needs to be clarified in this legislation, and I think it's important, this is not about a debate over the merits of calorie information or not. This is really about how FDA has proposed a regulation that really comes down to a one-size-fits-all, does not provide for technology solutions, apps, online solutions, or businesses coming up with other ways of posting that could actually even be more accurate and consumer-friendly than what the FDA is proposing. If you're given a range of calorie counts on the menu board, how does that really provide you the information that you might be seeking as far as how many calories are in a pizza?
All right, Mr. Malone, you sought to.
Well, I mean, I think that you're asking an important question because my understanding is that if the establishment receives the majority of their orders, online, then they only have to provide the information, remotely through the website. So if you come in, you walk in, and you're not one of those, then you're not going to get that information at point of purchase. So this is where I think the bill does damage, if you will, to what we're trying to accomplish here, because right now, it's pretty much at the point of purchase that you have to get that information, and that's considerably weakened by her bill.
All righty, I yield back.
Thank you very much.
This gentleman from Colorado seek time.
I do, thank you, Mr.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go to Mr. Pallone. And in looking through that, we have an outline in the bill and some of the things it does. It seems to me like there could have been some basis for a bipartisan bill here. Some of them at least sound reasonable. Things like stipulating that the ability of a consumer to order from an advertisement or a photo on Instagram or Twitter does not necessarily mean it's on a menu, or requiring the FDA to establish how nutrition content for variable menu items works. Are there some improvements that there might be room for a bipartisan bill that we agree would improve the quality of information that consumers get?
Well, if I could answer your question as such, one of the things I'm trying to stress here is, I'm not just coming to this, today. I mean, over the last couple of years or so, I've had a lot of different establishments contact me, bring me into their store to show what works and what doesn't work. In my opinion, the FDA, which remember, this is not in effect right now, it's been delayed, at least until next year. I think the FDA is really trying to work right now out these kinks and do things in a better way to address some of the concerns that you raised or that Ms. McMorris-Rogers has raised. And so that's why I think that this really is premature. I mean, not only I don't like the bill because I think of the consequences, but I also think it's premature because if you talk to even the various organizations, the grocers, the supermarkets, the different trade organizations, as we speak, they continue to work with the FDA, and the FDA has really worked out a lot of the concerns that have been expressed over the years.
So in your conversations with the FDA, they've never, or have they ever told you, hey, we actually lack authority to fix this or that, we lack authority to do with social media? So you're confident that they, as long as they're well-intended, they actually do have the authority to work out a lot of these issues under
Right,
the current law?
and, you know, I know in my office alone, and I know in other offices, a lot of us have actually, you know, gone to the FDA, talked to them about different problems that, you know, might arise based on the guidance or the draft rules. So, I mean, I really want to stress to you that I believe that we've made a lot of progress already in addressing some of these things, and there's no reason why it has to be legislated, in my opinion.
So, and again, you know, as I said, so there's some that I think we all agree with in principle, and I think the argument is that they have the authority to fix it and they will. There's some that we disagree with in principle as well. Certainly I do, and I think you indicated you do as well. One I wanted to touch upon is the enforcement. It would seem to me that by giving complete indemnity from civil litigation and only allowing proactive actions by the United States or a state around enforcement really guts the enforcement of this and almost makes it meaningless and will be widely unenforced under that. Could you address the goal behind making sure that there can in fact be civil litigation and that restaurants are more likely to comply if that's out there?
Well, again, an individual citizen doesn't have any legal recourse. I mean, so I think that's a big change from the law. And then, you know, the idea that the FDA would require right now, you know, under the draft rules, that the retail establishment would have to certify that the nutrition information is truthful and not misleading. I mean, by prohibiting that, by eliminating any individual lawsuits, I think you go pretty far towards shielding any liability and, as a consequence, any enforcement.
Yeah, and last one for Ms. McMorris Rogers. So I'm one of those consumers that really likes to know this stuff, and I want to know what's in my food. And the fear that I have with this is I sometimes order online, right? So there's several services, especially if I'm, you know, here alone in Washington, we work late at night, I might order some food in. A lot of that comes from restaurants that also serve, you know, that you might go out to as well. So it seems to me as a consumer, why can't I get that information both ways? If I'm currently understanding what you're doing correctly, they would only have to post that information in the higher volume of the two. So if they do more business online, it would be available there. But if I go in the door and sit down, yes, I theoretically can get it, but it's not there on the menu. Vice versa, if they do more business in person, I would get it there, but I wouldn't have to have it online. So is that a correct reading of the bill, and how does that address the fact that many restaurants are multi-platform and deliver as well as offer people customer service in their store?
Well, the goal of this bill is to make it give more flexibility and give more flexibility so that the consumer, in my opinion, is going to get more accurate information in the end. And to allow for there to be more options made available. Right now,
how would I get
FDA
more accurate information from this bill? How would I get better and more accurate
because it
information?
gives the individual food establishment an opportunity to provide information in various ways rather than it just having to be one way that one size fits all that the FDA is mandating right now.
Well,
One of the,
Mr.
I
Malone?
mean, we talked a lot about the single menu, okay, but the other thing that I wanted to stress is the serving size. I mean, there's a lot of, under the current bill, there has to be, I mean, it's the FDA that determines, you know, how you define the serving size, and so it's a lot easier for people to understand what they're getting based on a sort of uniform serving size. And so she's right that that is, you know, one size fits all. But the problem is that if you then let the retail establishment determine the serving size, which is what the bill does, then you get all kinds of confusion over what you're actually getting because you can manipulate the serving size.
So as a consumer, I'd be more likely to be more confused by
I
that
think so.
information.
So, I mean, I'm not just, again, I mean, in some ways, it's true that the two of us agree more than some of the other members of the committee.
Well, I don't know about
But I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you don't have some uniformity, then it does become more confusing. So I'm not even disagreeing with her that you know, there is some one size fits all here, but that's also important for the consumer as well in certain circumstances.
Yeah, it seems to me very important that there's no way to manipulate serving size to mislead customers or even undeliberately mislead it. It's confusing enough to have it just there in front of you, and it's important it's in front of you in multiple platforms. I mean, a menu, or if I order through one of the online services that delivers, it should be there in both of those. And the fact that it's at one of those, which maybe 60% of their volume, doesn't really help me if I'm in that other 40% and trying to order that way, doesn't help me feed my family. So I would tend to agree with Mr. Pallone. This seems to me a step backwards on some of these areas. Some of them are, as Mr. Pallone indicated, they're innocuous, perhaps redundant, because we feel we can do them through rule, and the FDA is in fact doing them. If they lack authority, and I guess I would ask Mr. Morris Rogers the same question I asked Mr. Pallone, has the FDA indicated?
Oh, my.
Okay. Has the FDA indicated that they lack authority
Somebody.
in some of these areas, that they need this additional authority that you're seeking to give them, for instance, to determine nutritional consent for variable menu items and combination meals? Is that something they cannot do right now? You feel they don't want to do, or they lack authority to do, I guess is the question.
They, to date, have not been willing to provide that kind of flexibility. And I would submit that the FDA, the draft rules were largely the same as the final rules turned out, despite numerous meetings, many letters, so many groups from around the country who came, sat down with the FDA, sought some flexibility, brought to their attention some of the uniqueness in their establishments, and yet the FDA moved forward with final rules that were largely what they had put in draft form. To date, the FDA has not been willing to look at flexible options to meet the goal here. I would also let the gentleman know that 40% of the Democrats on the Energy and Commerce Committee did support this legislation, and we have worked largely in a bipartisan fashion, trying to come up with a solution that reaches the goal but does provide the flexibility so that these individual establishments are not facing such a burdensome requirement on them. And yes, I think it's only because of the outcry across the country that the FDA did delay the rule, and then we were able to get legislation or a rider in the omnibus that further made that clear that FDA would have to wait to move forward with a final rule, because there is a lot of concern still.
I would disagree, though. I mean, we had a hearing on this, and I think the FDA demonstrated very effectively, and we had representatives from some of the different organizations that are and trade groups that are impacted, and they in fact did say that the FDA was working with them and provided a lot of flexibility, and it isn't over yet. So, again, I mean, I think the answer to your question is, because I think you asked the question, does the FDA have the ability through rulemaking to be more flexible? The question is yes, they do.
And you remain confident that that's an ongoing process?
It's definitely ongoing as we speak.
And I yield back.
They haven't been willing to date.
Thank you very much, gentleman. Yields back his time. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I was sitting here listening to this discussion, and it seems to me this is a perfect way of putting in frame one of the biggest problems we've got in government right now, and that is that the Congress delegates its authority to these agencies, and we don't put many, if any, limitations on the agencies. They take that unlimited authority, and they go too far with it. And then we have to come back in here and do what we're doing now, which seems to me to be something that ought to be able to be done by common sense people sitting down working in good faith. I don't see that happening very much with these agencies, I just got to tell you. And I think that they have run amok with their power. And I think the Congress needs to take its power back, because they wouldn't have this power if we hadn't delegated it to them. Now, I've got some questions. I know this is probably, Mr. Pallone, not what you would agree with at all. I've got some questions whether Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to go this far, to make this level of regulation. I can just imagine the Founding Fathers sitting in the Constitutional Convention saying, well, does Congress have the power to regulate how people that sell food would disclose caloric intake? I just don't think they had that discussion, and I think they would find it unbelievable that we're having this discussion. But assuming we have the power under the Necessary and Proper Clause, we've delegated it to an agency that's not elected by anybody. And under this administration, they seem to be not accountable to anybody. except the Congress. And here is a very small effort by Ms. Rogers to bring this power back in a small way to the Congress. And I happen to think that that is some common sense that was missing when the FDA went through this rulemaking process. And I know it's not done yet. But we've seen the final product of a lot of the rulemaking processes of these federal agencies. And it's appalling. It is absolutely appalling. And my constituents expect me, and I think a lot of our constituents expect us around the table, to take that authority back. So I applaud this bill. It's a small thing, really a small thing to take back a little bit of our power. I just wish we did it more often and in more ways. And while I know the FDA is going to continue to work with whomever to try to get the final rule, they really should be working with us because we gave them the power to begin with. And I find the agencies up here to be haughty and arrogant and totally unresponsive when we try to do that. So I'm going to support this rule. I certainly intend to support this bill on the floor, and I hope we get more bills, Mr. Chairman, before this committee that will allow me to vote and my colleagues to vote on taking back our power that we've delegated to these federal agencies that are simply out of control. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. Good points. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Gentleman from Washington, Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just let me say thank you to the good lady from the state of Washington for bringing this legislation forward. I appreciate the effort on both your part, Mr. Pallone, as well, on educating the Rules Committee about this important piece. Seems to me that we're arguing whether we should label or not label, and that, to me, isn't what the legislation is about. And maybe you need to enlighten me. I don't think we're having an agreement on whether consumers should have caloric information, or we're not talking about compromising public health. I think what this is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there has been a lot of businesses around the country who are trying to comply with the law, trying to give information to the consumers that is potentially going to be required of them through this rulemaking process, and do it in such a way that they can actually give consumers good information. And so it seems like what we're trying to do is give more flexibility. I've heard that word a lot of time, so that we can, so that businesses can utilize the system that works best for them in giving that information to their consumers. And so trying to do that seems like a good thing, to give better information instead of ranges, but give more accurate information to the consumers so that they can make that decision at their point of purchase. So just a couple of questions. It seems to me that this will help improve menu labeling requirements. But just let me ask, does this exempt anyone that under current law would not be exempted?
I don't believe that she reduces the basis for who's eligible or not, right? No.
There are no exemptions.
No, I mean, it's exempt now. You have to have at least 20 establishments, but Ms. McMorrick-Rogers' bill doesn't change that. You have to have at least 20 outlets. She doesn't
Under
change
current FDA law?
Right.
Or current
Under
FDA
current,
proposed
right.
regulation?
Right.
And this legislation would have no exemptions?
No, you keep the current, we'll let her ask the question, but I think she keeps the current law in that respect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there's a disagreement over this 20, that someone has to own 20 food
Outlets.
establishments, right? If you're under a larger franchise, or you're a franchisee, and you're still pulled under this
Right, you don't
requirement,
change
even
that,
if you own just one store.
Right.
You don't-
But I don't think she changes that in her bill.
Right.
In other words, the FDA has interpreted this to say, like, I'll
Okay.
give you an example. There's a Tilio Pizza in New Jersey, right? And I know
Sounds good.
Tilio, right? And he has more than 20 franchisees. They still come under it, but she doesn't change that.
Right, but Harvest Foods is a great example in Washington State, right? And there's a lot of Harvest, so they're under the larger franchise of Harvest Foods, but you're an individual in small town in eastern Washington owning an individual grocery store, you are pulled under these requirements, and your deli is pulled under these requirements. So if you want to offer Aunt Sarah's favorite peach pie when it's in season in your deli, you would not be able to do that under the rules as they are currently written, because that is not an item that is available every day of the year, among all of the Harvest Foods stores in the country. So
Well, you can do it, but you'd have to post the information. There are certain, look, for example, there's certain food items that are exempted, right? Like the daily specials, temporary occasional menu items, custom orders, condiments. But I think what she's saying is if one of Attilio's franchisees decided they wanted to have pineapple pizza for 6 months because pineapples were in season, they would have to indicate the caloric content.
Okay, well, you don't like pineapple. So, okay, well, I'll stop with that line of question, but I appreciate that. We talked a lot about, or there has been some talk about serving size and the definition of that, and that it could be arbitrary. And some people think that businesses could be misleading consumers by putting a false serving size down and using those numbers instead. But what I read in the legislation, that's not the case, is that restaurants will not or be able to set arbitrary sizes. Is that correct?
The problem is...
And I know when I order, say, a
When you
Big
go
Mac,
around.
you get a certain size, you know?
Well, my understanding, and again, I don't know if my colleagues are going to disagree with me, but my understanding now is that the FDA, under the current law, would basically determine, have certain rules as to the serving size. So you can't determine that on your own. And what the problem is that under her bill, restaurants and retail food establishments could determine the serving size for a standard menu item. And that, therefore, I mean, when you go in, like, I'll give you an example. You guys are going to laugh, but I think the other day I went in and wanted to buy watermelon, right? So, there's different types of watermelons, and you look at the labels sometimes, and, you get confused as to this, depending on the serving size. So the problem is that if the FDA determines the serving size in a more uniform way, then it's going to be easier for people to figure out how many calories they're actually getting. If you leave it up to, I hate to keep using Attilio, but if you leave it up to Attilio to determine that, it may be confusing because there are going to be different serving sizes in different restaurants.
Of course, we all know how good the FDA is at determining serving size. My bottle of creamer for my coffee says there's 63 servings in there, and I have never gotten close to that, but that's my problem.
Will the gentleman yield just quickly?
I certainly will.
It's actually addressed to you, but sort of through you. Is there such a thing as a calorie-heavy watermelon? Or diet pizza?
No, I buy the
I mean,
watermelon because
really?
it's not doesn't have many
I mean,
calories.
I don't care how big the slice is, there aren't any calories there.
There
To
probably
speak
are
of.
some. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some.
Well, I think that actually makes the gentlelady's point that maybe we're going a little far and there's easier ways to do that.
Well, and just to reclaim my time, I just, and appreciate Mr. Chairman giving me so much time here, but it seems like flexibility and offering businesses the ability to meet the requirements of a law, give the consumers correct information in ways that they can understand, in terms that they can understand, and serving sizes that they will actually receive makes a lot of sense to me. And so I'm not convinced that there's any nefarious effort here, that we're trying to be as open as possible in this bill. And so anyway, I appreciate both of your opinions, and appreciate the good ladies bringing this good legislation forward, and thank the chairman for the time.
Yes, sir. I tell you, both of you have had a strong dose of two Texans here, and I know it's shaded some of the views that come here, but I go to restaurants in Dallas, Texas, the Texas Restaurant Association, that is part of the National Restaurant Association. They make sure the food is good and clean and does the right things and puts the heart on there. And I think I'm responsible enough to do what I ought to do. I'm opposed, it's not a reason why I oppose the Affordable Care Act. It's another reason why I oppose the Affordable Care Act. I'm sorry that we're here having to do this today, but I want to thank both of you and Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Thank you for taking time. This is, once again, another, in the Life of the Rules Committee, another opportunity to hear about interesting roles of government and how we all respond to them. I want to thank both of you very much. If you please
If I
make sure.
could, I'd
Yes,
like
ma'am.
to insert into the record some letters. We have over 300 different organizations across the country in support of this legislation. We have the Free Market Coalition in favor of this legislation, Americans for Prosperity, National Taxpayer Union, and others. And
Probably Mike Burgess
would,
for Congress, too.
Would love to, I'll give those also for the record.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. I want to thank both of you for your time today at this very interesting hearing, and thank you very much. I don't think I see any other members that are seeking time on this bill, and so as soon as our witnesses have a chance to exit stage right, then we will have a chance to have Mr. Halpern come forward, and the chairman will now be in receipt of a motion. Excuse me just a moment, please. Gentlewoman seeks time.
About to lose my chance here to ask unanimous consent to put the statement from Congresswoman DeLauro into the...
Without objection, we want Rosa's information in there.
Thank you very much.
Does any other member seek time? Any other member seek time? Seeing none, the chair will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 2017, the Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act of 2015, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for the purpose of amendment, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides that on any legislative day during the period from February 15, 2016 through February 22, 2016, the journal of the proceedings of the previous day shall be considered as approved, and the chair may at any time declare the House adjourned to meet at a date and time to be announced by the chair in declaring the adjournment. Section 3 of the rule provides that the Speaker may appoint members to perform the duties of the chair for the duration of the period addressed by Section 2. Finally, Section 4 of the rule provides that the Committee on the Judiciary may at any time before 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 16, 2016, file a report to accompany H.R. 3624.
Thank you very much. You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Is there amendment or discussion to that?
Yes,
Gentlewoman
please,
from New
Mr.
York,
Chairman. I
recognized.
have
Yes,
an
ma'am.
amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 2017 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
Thank you very much. Discussion? All right, those in favor, slaughter amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call.
Gentlewoman asks for roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess? No. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers? No. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne? No. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse? No. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
Motion's not agreed, amendment's not agreed to, not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the amendment the motion from the gentleman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it. And accordingly, the gentleman, Dr. Burgess, will get round two at this issue.
Mr. Polis from Colorado
And Mr.
will
Polis from
represent the
Colorado
minority.
will handle this. I do not anticipate any more Rules Committee meetings this week. And, yeah, pray PTL. Lastly, I want to, as we so many times do, thank our staff for the great work that they have done again, another week to prepare our witnesses, to make sure that we're here. And I want to thank all members for their attendance today for a most interesting hearing. Thank you very much. Rules Committee is now done with its work for the week pending floor announcements.